I'm gonna be honest with you, I am so tired of the misconceptions that are out there about binge eating. I literally hear about them every single day. They're endless, and I bet you can think of some as well. The things that we have been told to believe about binge eating that aren't actually true, most of which is rooted in weight stigma, in anti-fatness, in this belief that only certain kinds of people end up binging, and it's just not true. I wanna dive into what these misconceptions are, why they're harmful, and how you can challenge them. Because when you're stuck in cycles of binge eating and you feel like it's your fault and or your body's fault, it makes it essentially impossible to get out of those cycles. You keep getting stuck in a shame cycle. You keep getting stuck in a guilt cycle. Then you go back to dieting and restricting, and then you feel guilt and shame, and then you binge, and then it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And I want you to get out of that cycle, and I want you to realize that there's so much more to binge eating than what we've been told, and so let's get into it. But before we dive in, my name is Catherine Metzelar. I'm a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, eating disorder specialist, and I help people to create peace with food and their body so that all of it takes up less headspace and they can live their lives with more abundance, joy, presence, and peace.
You definitely want to take a listen to this.
Binge eating is the experience of eating a large amount of food in a short amount of time in what is considered to be excessive quantity to the point of discomfort beyond any signs and signals of fullness. Even in that definition, you can see that there's some subjectivity, and so it's even difficult as clinicians for us to define it. But as we're going through this, I want you to be thinking about this is what the definition is of binge eating. For many people, their beliefs about binge eating is rooted in weight stigma. The assumption that I hear most is that someone is in a larger body because they're experiencing binge eating. Only people in large bodies experience binge eating disorder, and it's really just an issue for those in larger bodies. So this really brings up the first thing that people get wrong about binge eating. That's a huge misconception, which is that binge eating only happens for individuals in larger bodies. The thin people don't experience it. And I think it's important to talk about this because one, folks all along the body size spectrum can experience all kinds of disordered behaviors. Just because a behavior exists doesn't mean that it fits in a certain category of body sizes or in a different category of body sizes. For example, individuals in larger bodies can also have an eating disorder, in particular anorexia nervosa. They can be restricting, and that can also happen for folks in thinner bodies and everything along that spectrum. And the same goes for binge eating. Weight is not a behavior. Weight is not a behavior. So if we think about it in that context, the behavior is binge eating. It has nothing to do with someone's body shape or size. Now, of course, binge eating can be an actual disorder depending on the frequency, or it can be just a disordered eating behavior where it's happening so often. But this belief that it only happens for individuals in larger bodies causes a ton of harm, because what happens is we make assumptions about other people's eating experience and we ascribe eating behaviors to someone's body size, when in fact the things that contribute to our body size are much more complex than that. And I know that our culture doesn't want us to think that and believe that, but the reality is we don't fully understand all the things that contribute to our body size, and we're just told that, hey, it's just the food that you eat and the way that you move, when in reality we know that things like genetics impact our body size pretty significantly. History of eating disorder and disordered eating also impacts our body size pretty significantly, but nonetheless, this is an example of weight stigma and the ways that it shows up. We've gotten it wrong as a culture, in this dieting culture that we exist in regards to being told that only people in larger bodies binge eat. This is a lie, and there are plenty of people in thin bodies or medium bodies that experience binge eating and or have binge eating disorder. The second misconception that I hear often is that binge eating or binge eating disorder is an issue of overeating and not restriction. I know this is probably going to shock you. Likely take a deep breath. Binge eating And the presentation of binge eating often goes alongside of restriction. Literally in the entirety of my career, I have not worked with a single person who has been experiencing binge eating with some kind of frequency, daily, multiple times a day, that isn't also restricting alongside of it. So why does this matter in the context of binge eating? Why is challenging this misconception really important? Well, this is because a lot of times when we experience binge eating, and if you're experiencing this, you might be able to relate, we feel like there's something wrong with us. We have a problem of overeating. We have a problem of emotional eating. And so usually the first line of defense in that is to start restricting someone's intake. A lot of diets, programs, advice out there from diet culture says, okay, well, you have a problem of overeating, so I'm gonna give you this plan. We're gonna restrict what you're eating. We're gonna set up a lot of guidelines. We're gonna give you all these parameters, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start restricting. And then usually for some people, depending, they can maintain that for a little bit, but then the cycle just starts all over again. They start binging again. And then the thought and feeling constantly is, there's something wrong with me. Fundamentally, I can't control myself around food. I don't have enough willpower. I am wrong, and there's no resolution to this. And this needs to stop. Why? Because one, it's not helpful, and two, by doing that, by offering someone a restrictive diet or a restrictive way of eating, actually makes the binge eating worse. If we're restricting in thought, I shouldn't be having this, I need to eat less of this food, oh my gosh, I've eaten already enough carbohydrates, all the thoughts that we have. Restricting in thought or action, I'm not bringing certain foods into the house or food groups. Both of those together can contribute to the increase in binge eating. At first, it might contribute to a decrease, but over time, the impact of restriction and restricting food means that we are going to binge eat later because we're not exposed to the foods regularly, we may not be getting enough food, and also because when we eventually have the food, it feels like the last and only time we're gonna eat it, what we sometimes call the Last Supper mentality. We think about other behaviors as being really restrictive, and I get that there's a difference, right? Not eating is restrictive in comparison to binge eating, but we have to be zooming out. We have to, because a lot of times folks that are binge eating are skipping meals, not having snacks, not eating enough during the day, and that will impact their experience of binge eating. The third misconception that I hear mostly from wellness culture and even sometimes diet culture, definitely from certain clinicians, like I've heard naturopathic clinicians say this, if your body gets everything that it needs, then you won't be binging on the junk food and the bad food, etc. So let's break this down, and I want to talk to you about why this is a misconception in particular. When they say what your body needs, they're talking about certain kinds of protein and vegetables and maybe even a certain portion of carbohydrates. Needs meaning ticking all the boxes of what are essentials for your body to be eating. Within, important note, within their parameters of what they deem your body needs. So what happens? A lot of people will follow a program, follow the advice from their doctor, start ticking the boxes of eating the things that they need, and they're still binge eating. They still feel out of control around food. They feel like, gosh, there's something wrong with me. Again, that shame cycle that continues to be perpetuated. And so this misconception, again, is really harmful because even if we're getting all of the essentials, meaning protein and vegetables and some carbohydrates, we need more variety in our food. We need it. And just because we're getting what someone else deems that we need, it actually also might not be enough. The reality is, it's really difficult to understand with a lot of specificity what someone needs in all the ways. And even if you're ticking the boxes of doing all the right things, we have to be thinking about play foods, pleasure, foods that we enjoy, because eating food isn't just about eating food to get our body needs met. It's also about connection and community and joy and pleasure. And if we exclude all of those foods, we are going to want those foods a lot more, and then when we're exposed to them, we're going to end up binge eating. So I think this advice is really harmful. It's a total misconception. I see this literally all the time in my work. Then people will come in saying, I feel afraid of X food. I feel out of control out of food. And I just think there's something wrong with me. I think I'm addicted to food and I'm a binge eater. And what sometimes will come out is, well, I'm getting all the things that I need, so why is this happening? The reality is we actually need more than that as humans. And the more that we end up restricting, the more that that will then impact our experience with binge eating. So I want you to be challenging this idea that if your body gets everything that it needs in just the right way, that you're gonna stop binge eating. It's just not the case. Yes, is it true that when we're not getting enough food that we can also end up binge eating? Yeah, absolutely, but that's not usually included in those conversations. When it's said, it's usually said from the lens of wellness culture, eat in this very particular way. And if you do eat in that particular way, then you'll be fine. Then you'll stop binge eating. Done and done. So I wanna challenge you to challenge that misconception that we need a variety of different kinds of foods and not exclusively just the foods that we are told that we need. We need more than that. You need more than that. In summary, there's a lot of misconceptions about binge eating that I think harm a lot of people and may have harmed you. This list is not exhaustive by any means, but these are 3 very common misconceptions that get in the way of you healing your relationship with food and from you stopping that cycle of feeling guilt and shame, ending up restricting your food intake, binging again, and just being there, and then just constantly feeling like there's something wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you. I really want you to take away from this video and anything else that I offer you in the future, there is nothing wrong with you. We exist in a messed up culture that tells you all kinds of things about food and about bodies, and it leaves you feeling confused. There is a way that you can heal this. It just can take some time, and it can also be really challenging because we're challenging all these beliefs and things that we've been told as a result of existing in diet culture. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want more from me, check out the free resources that I have for you below. I always appreciate a like if you got any value out of this video, and I will see you back here soon.